It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and this is the Bob Leonard Show. We'll be with you for about an hour, and what we do is we take the stories you've been reading about in your newspaper and watching on television this week, and we put our spin on it. We give you our interpretation of what's really behind those stories. Keep in mind, for example, television has 30, 40 seconds to tell you a story. They can't get into it very deeply. What we do is we say there's more to it, and here's the more that we're going to give you now. And like we tell you every week, it's only our opinion. You can accept or reject it, and but we're going to have our say. Now, if you miss tonight's program, or you know somebody that did and they want to see the program, we're on tomorrow night, Wednesday night, and a repeat of this program from 11 to 12 o'clock. And if you can't stay up that late and you have a computer, you can plug into the internet and punch in flinttalk.com, and our program will be played for you from the beginning by just punching it in. And then we have 5 or 6 programs that have been backed up by flinttalk.com, so you can go back 5 or 6 weeks and pick up a program that you want to see again or you hadn't seen. It'll come up on that internet number. So flinttalk.com, you can see it whenever you want to. Now, in the last couple of weeks, certain things have been happening at City Hall that makes you begin to wonder, what do those people think they're there for? And it's not all one-sided. Certain things are happening in the mayor's office, certain things are happening with the city council, at least the anti-Williamson city council people, and you have to wonder, why are they wasting our money? Why are they wasting so much time? We get frustrated, but unfortunately our frustration after a while becomes complacent. When you look at what's going on in City Hall, these players and this political tragedy, which it really is, never seems to get over their silliness. And that's why we become complacent. We say, these people are crazy, nothing we can do about it. But, after the last couple of weeks, we might want to ratchet up our anger at the antagonists here, the mayor and the anti-Williamson members of the Flint City Council. I say this because the recent antics have gone beyond their personal animosity towards each other to where their one-upsmanship is directly hurting innocent people and wasting your money, taxpayers' money. It kind of started here over the last 2 weeks. You might remember that the Flint mayor fired the previous housing commission for screwing up when they appointed a guy executive director of the commission who clearly was not qualified and fabricated his resume. But the fired commission committed the unpardonable sin of not checking out his resume and his credentials. If they did, they wouldn't have hired him, I hope. But such incompetency of not checking out a resume, because they would have found that this guy was under investigation for stealing money at his last job. Now, this incompetency was embarrassing to the mayor. He had appointed them. Well, he got rid of them as soon as this came out. It was in headlines in the paper and on television. So he appointed 5 new members to the board. Now, the general practice is that the new board's names would be submitted to the council for confirmation. But what happened is the anti-Williamson faction on the council rejected the appointments, even though there was nobody that was not qualified. But what it did, it left the commission, the Housing Commission, without any members on the commission or ability of anyone to act. For all intent and purposes, the commission was shut down. Now, some of the problems here was that the commission, Housing Commission, owed people who worked for them salaries that they couldn't get because there was no commissioners who could sign the checks. The commission rules required 2 of the commissioners to sign their checks. There was none. The ones that were fired, they didn't want to sign. They weren't going to be personally liable in case something went wrong. And the new ones were rejected by the city council. So now we have not only people who work for the commission that couldn't get paid. And keep in mind, most of these people live from week to week. They have to pay to buy groceries and whatever. Put food on the table. And now they don't have this check that they're used to getting each week. And also vendors couldn't be paid because there was no one to sign the checks for the vendors. Well, anyway, these people have suffered, according to the Williamson camp, because the anti-Williamson people on the county wanted to get even or wanted to, cause him problems, whatever reason. There was absolutely, according to the Williamson people, no reason to turn these people down. They were all good people. Now, the reason for the rejection, as stated by the anti-Williamson council, according to the Williamson people, the reason they gave, according to the Williamson people, clearly establishes their irresponsibility. And I guess you have to decide that. They're just trying to make, according to Williamson, look bad. They say they take the wages out of the pockets of these innocent employees, vendors, who have really nothing to do with this antagonism between the two groups. Now, here's another little gimmick they use to further, according to Williamson, to further show their preoccupation with doing what they can to destroy or embarrass Williamson. These 5 anti-council members ended up putting the matter on the floor. At first there was a discussion about, this was in the committee meeting, to put it over for a week, and it could come up a week from now. But they decided to send it to the floor and vote it down, and that way it can't come up for another month, according to Robert's rules. Well, now, what are they going to do here? We got a month where this issue, where these appointees can't come up. Now, there is a way that the Williamson people are working to get around it, and they may have the answer, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we're talking about how far this antagonism has gone, and how it's no more just a personal dislike for each other and the one-upsmanship, as far as one doing something to the other and the other doing something back. It's hurting innocent people. And that's what we're talking about. Now, here, I want you to listen to this discussion at the council meeting here about a week ago on these 5 names that Williamson had submitted to the council for their approval, so that the commission, the Housing Commission, could operate. And listen to the reasoning of why they were rejected. It would have seemed because of the churches they go to, and because they're friends of Williamson. We'll get into that in a minute too. The question is, the Williamson people says this shows their irresponsibleness. It's absolutely petty to shut down an entire commission who are supposed to be renting houses to low-income people who have checks coming, don't get the checks because there's no one there to sign it, because the council allegedly would not approve these people. Not because, according to Williamson's people, not because they weren't qualified. They are qualified. But it seems to be because of the church they came from, because they're friends of Williamson. Play that tape, please. Watch this.
3-8, Councilwoman Sims.
On 3-8, I just have a serious problem, and I know the majority of the appointments will be from various churches in this community. But we're talking about 3 appointments right now. The first one is a member of Councilman Buchanan's church, Christ Fellowship. The second one, let's see, Erica Hunter,
Carrie Nelson's cousin.
Carrie Nelson's cousin, and just have and this Roberts, and I believe
Annie Young's sister.
I believe she goes to Carrie Nelson's church, and I just have a serious problem. These are council people that have an appearance to have a real close neck-to-neck, side-to-side relationship with Don Williamson, and there's an appearance that their pastors at their church, Antioch and Christ Fellowship, has a very close hand relationship with the mayor. And I just have a serious problem supporting something that has that appearance of some type of conflict, because we all know that there's probably over $1 million in rehab and maintenance funding over there. And these people, with other folks and organizations that have a relationship with Don Williamson and these 2 my colleagues, I would just hate for one of their buddies to get the contract over there, one being also a member of Christ Fellowship Church. So at this point, I think the city is large enough for us to seek folks that don't have a relationship. Why don't we make contact or make a plea to the community, to folks that have some type of interest or, genuine interest in the Housing Commission and being able to work with these folks and over there. So I have a serious problem with all 3 of these. So I won't be supporting either 838, I'm sorry, God, I need my glass, 638, 639, nor 641.
Yes, Councilman Kincaid.
My only motion was to get these out on the council floor so that we can deal with them and dispose of them or approve them or whatever we want to do. I mean, if we postpone them here, they just come back. If we go out there and we deal with them, it's done with. And
I thought that motion was still in force. I just wanted to separate them from the Board of Appeals.
All right, we have separated them. We're only doing the 638 right now. The motion is to move it to council. The issue has been made of diversity, the appearance of any impropriety. The motion is to move it to council. Councilman Buchanan.
Councilman, does it pose a conflict? I'm a member of a large church, but this guy goes to my church.
I don't think in and of itself it's going to pose a conflict because of that. As an elected official, of course, any type of close relationship, anything that has an appearance of an impropriety needs to be disclosed to the city attorney's office, which council members do that, so abstain on those that need to be abstained from. it would need to be disclosed to us in detail what the relationship is to be able to make that determination. But in and of itself, judges deal with people that they know on a day in and day out basis. It's hard to come in contact with people go to churches in communities, and they will come in contact with people that they know. However, it's when things are usually of a financial nature, relatives, people that you may have some type of decision-making power over, that then you have to look a little bit deeper into it. But it's not in and of itself. I would not presuppose that there is a conflict just because it's of the same church affiliation. Likewise, people go to the same fitness centers and other types of things within the community, different groups, all types of things.
Thank you. Were you done, Councilman Buchanan?
Yeah.
Councilwoman Poplar?
Mr. Buchanan, it just gives the appearance, you may not know this man because he comes from your church, but by it being 1 million gazillion churches in the city of Flint, and the appearance looks ugly when everything that is acquainted to these boards are coming from Antioch, Christ Fellowship, and New Jerusalem. It just gives an ugly, nasty appearance. It may not be nothing wrong, but it just seems like something is stinking in Denmark, and it certainly is not the cheese. So, that's what it is. And this is the way people see it. That how come appointments cannot come from other places within this city? Why is it coming from these hubs? Like we got little airplanes waiting to be shot into these slots. That's what it looks like.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, there you are. Apparently, they were rejected because of the church they come from. Not because they weren't qualified, but because the church they came from. And as a result, and then you heard Scott Kincaid, whom I like and who I think generally is a pretty good guy, but some of these people who are good people are so mixed up in this anti-Williamson thing, and he may have brought a lot of it on himself, but the point is, it's time now to put it aside, it seems to me, and begin working for the people. Here we have a commission that can operate, and these people on this commission are preventing it from operating because the church that these appointees, these new appointees, come from. Not a question of qualifications. Should they not pick anybody from these churches because they have a friendship, the ministers or the bishop or the pastors have a friendship with Williamson? I think he has a friendship with all the ministers pretty much in the city. Would it make any difference if he picked the people for the commission who came from the churches that Carolyn Sens comes from, or Mrs. Poplar comes from, or Mr. Neely comes from? Keep in mind, Neely is the guy running for mayor who seconds the motion to put this on the floor so it can't be so they can vote it down and it can't be dealt with for another month. What are these people going to do? But that's their plan, according to the Williamson people. And that's unfortunate, because the whole basis is because they turn down because of the church they attend. Because they're friends of Williamson's. Now keep in mind, so there's no misunderstanding here. Flint enacted a new charter in about 1972-73 where they established the strong mayor form of government. Previously we had kind of the weak mayor form. That means that the mayor was just a figurehead. He was chosen by a vote of the council, and the council would then pick a city manager who would run the city, make all the appointments to all the various departments, all the commissions like the Housing Commission and things like that. And if things went wrong, you had to blame the city manager who wasn't elected. He was chosen by the majority of the city council. Things went wrong, and you go to the city council, and they'd be blaming each other. And they may fire the city manager. And new appointments go into the city council, or into the administration's offices, the various departments. To get beyond that, the city of Flint, the voters enacted this charter that formed the strong mayor form of government. Now, the key to the strong mayor form of government is simply this. You have one person that you can vote in or out, which you couldn't do with the city manager who appointed all these department heads. Who picks? The mayor picks the department heads. If things go wrong, you can fix responsibility. It's on the mayor. So obviously, the people who created this strong mayor form of government in this charter that was approved by the people, they assumed that the mayor would be able to put his own people in position because he's responsible for them. So if he wants to put his friends in that do a bad job, you vote him out. But if he wants every one of his friends are not unqualified just because they're his friends, or they go to a particular church. And that's the argument of the Williamson people. They say that suggests what's happening here. This should suggest the total irresponsibility of these 5 anti-Williamson people on the council. I know some of these people, they're not irresponsible, but they're letting their antagonisms, I think, get away from them, and they ought to bring it back and say, we'll deal with the issue of the mayor in the next election, which is like in August, and then in November if he gets by the primary. That's where you deal with it. You can be critical of the job they're doing, but don't try to create situations where the general public is hurt, or the taxpayers' money is lost, or employees are left out in the, out in the rain. I mean, come on, let's bring it back. Now, having said that, the question has been raised whether Williamson even has to go to the city council to get their approval for these housing commissioners. There's a state law that tells the local governments, the villages, the cities, what have you, that have housing commissions, how to appoint them. And here's what it says. Here's a letter from Thomas Donlan, who's an attorney here in town, and one of the framers of the charter. He sat in as a charter member, putting the charter together. Here's what he says. The commission shall consist of 5 members to be appointed by the chief administrative officer of the city. That's the mayor. Except that if a city or village has a chief administrative officer who is not elected by the electors of the city or village, the members of the commission may be appointed by the official designated by a resolution adopted by the governing body of the city or the village. In other words, if there is no elected mayor, he isn't elected by the people, then the city council can choose the commission. But that's not the case here. This person who wrote this attorney, was a member of the charter drafting group in 1972. He says if you're elected, you have an elected chief administrator here, the mayor, then he appoints the members. You don't need the council approval. There's nothing in that statute that says you need council approval. So I say to the mayor, if he's concerned about paying these people. I'm sure he is, and the vendors and what have you, and the operation of the commission, so that they have 5 commissioners who can operate the commission and begin rehabilitating the housing and giving and renting out houses or apartments and things to people in need, then he ought to tell his 5 people he appointed, go up there and let's start. Let's sign those checks. Let's start the rehabilitation and fixing up of the housing, the public housing that's very much needed. They got something like 200 or 300 families on the waiting list. There's numerous apartments that are boarded up because they need to be renovated. None of this is being done and will not be done if the council is able to prevent the mayor from appointing these 5 commissioners. And we know that they have attempted to do that. They're talking about 3, but there's actually 4, because they like one that's on there. It's one of their people. They want to keep that person on there, even though the mayor has replaced him because his term has run out. It ran out about a year ago. So the mayor replaced him, and they're trying to keep him in there. And I think that that's unfortunate, because we cannot, under the strong mayor form of government, if the council, this anti-Williamson group, is allowed to continue their disruption, we cannot have the kind of government we want, where we want to fix responsibility, and if they screw up, you vote them out, and if they don't, you keep them in. And that's what's happened here. Let me give you another example of what's going on here. And here's an allegation by the Williamson people again. They claim there's another misuse of your tax money by this so-called anti-Williamson, kind of mean-spirited anti-Williamson's city council people. That's the Flint City Council. They point out that just this week, Williamson sent a request to the council to be permitted to use $500,000 of money in the major grants department that comes from the federal government, paid for by your federal income taxes. He wants this $500,000 to renovate an apartment complex. It's called Greenview Manor. It's located over there near Hurley Hospital, and very close to the 3rd Avenue corridor that everybody is trying to fix up. Now, the federal agency, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, they are responsible to allocate this federal money to local governments. And they are anxious. In fact, they are more than anxious. They have directed that this manor, these apartments, be fixed up. Here's what they're saying. We've got 84 one-bedroom apartments in this complex. Nobody wants one-bedroom apartments, so they're hard, no use fixing it up for one-bedrooms because it'll be a waste of money. So they say, we want you to combine those 84 one-bedrooms and create 42 2- and 3-bedroom apartments, because they can be rented. And you're talking about renting it to poor people, low-income people, so people who need it. So they want that apartment complex fixed up. Now, the council must approve this $500,000 expenditure by major grants for the renovation of these apartments. Now, according to Williamson, these 5 anti-Williamson people said, look, we're not giving you the $500,000, even though you've paid, the taxpayers have paid it in to the federal government, until you began providing money for 2 nonprofit organizations that have been prevented from getting money because they have misused it allegedly in the past. They have not paid their taxes as they're required to do under federal law. And they have fabricated their books to indicate that they are making money or not losing money when in fact it's not true. So when Williamson came into office, he eliminated the funding for these kinds of organizations. Now the city council, the anti-Williamson people, according to the Williamson camp, say you must fund these organizations that you've shut down in the past because they're friends of ours. Even though they've done maybe some things they shouldn't do, we still want them funded. And if you don't fund them, we're not giving you the $500,000 for the Greenview Manor renovation that HUD has directed you to do. Now that's almost like extortion. Maybe it is extortion. Now I want you to listen to this discussion at this council meeting. It was a committee meeting where this $500,000 was discussed. Now keep in mind, HUD has directed the city, the mayor, to spend $500,000 renovate it, and they have given him permission to use the $500,000 out of the major grants division of the city, which is funded by HUD and which is funded by taxpayers' money. So they have $500,000 in there. HUD says use that money to renovate. The city council must approve. They have rejected it. And here's the discussion of their rejection at the city council committee meeting last week. Can you play that, please?
We have submitted all that information to HUD, and HUD is reviewing that information, but before this resolution came before the council, I called to see if the information that we submitted to HUD was in an acceptable manner in order for us to proceed with giving funds to Mission of Peace. They indicated yes, we will be getting a letter to that effect at some point in time, but it is acceptable at this time to give Mission of Peace funds to implement this project. So all those items that are in that letter has been addressed.
Obviously, in my opinion, Greater Eastside has been, God, I can't use those words. But Nancy said she's going to work with us and try to get some funding for the Eastside because, you know, it's looking really bad over there. Riverside Drive, Royal Street, you know, they can use some new housing. So that people can feel good when they go home and see grass instead of weeds and see paved streets instead of dirt roads. You know, so
Did you get a private property from HUD, as you mentioned, for about $10, and there were a lot of contractual obligations that the city had to adhere to. We then transferred and sold the property to Mission of Peace in February of 2005, but that did not relieve the city of all their obligations to HUD, which one was to pay back the sales proceeds, which we did last year, and the other piece was to make sure that...
If we paid it back last year, why is it just now here?
No, I'm sorry, it's pay back the sales proceeds. The sales proceeds that we obtained from Mission of Peace when the city sold the property. Right. This piece is also a contractual obligation between HUD and the city, because when the city facilitated acquiring this property in 2001, it agreed to HUD that it would renovate the remaining units in the building, which was 47 of the 84. HUD renovated half of the units, and the city had an additional. Currently, at this time, Mission of Peace. But that does not relieve us of our obligation to renovate this building. And that's per HUD, and they are not alleviating us from this piece.
So we had to actually physically give that $197,000 back to HUD.
Yes. A monitoring deficiency in our June 22nd HUD letter, which indicated that there were some deficiencies which the HUD did not believe that the Commission of Peace Community Development Corporation could function as a charter, but since that time, we don't have it yet in writing.
Okay. Well, you know,
I do understand the importance of this because it's going to be going forward. It's been on hold for about a year or so.
Yes.
And it's important for us to get these units rehabbed so families probably can move in. But my concern is more so with our responsibility. We have obligation to HUD, and I want to make sure the same obligations will follow the Mission of Peace. And Councilwoman Sims had some concerns and wanted to see some documentation, as I would like to see the agreement as well.
Okay.
That's more in line with what I was asking for, Karen.
Okay. Okay.
But
Mr. Chairman, I can make a motion to postpone this for 2 weeks and we can deal with it.
support.
can would postponing this for 2 weeks hurt us at all, Karen?
Well, HUD is really on the city to renovate this building. I mean, we are out of compliance with our HUD contract of sale. I don't know that you'll have time to review these two agreements, but I can give you these two. I believe these are not our originals. So I would hope that these would be
Go ahead.
This could have been eliminated if you guys had taken the comments and statements seriously at the last meeting and brought the proper information. Now, I know personally I've been postponing this and pushing it back with the support of Mr. Neely for over a year. And I specifically sat here and talked and read for 15 minutes.
Now, you know, they talk about you got to provide us information. According to Williamson people, they provided the information. But I think the key thing here is what Carolyn Sims says. I've been postponing this for a year with the help of Mr. Neely. If this thing has come up for a year, why didn't they go get the records? Why didn't they talk to HUD? I mean, this seems to be kind of a phony response that they have here. Now keep in mind, we're talking about apartments for low-income people that can't afford to buy houses, wherever, you know, people who have probably wages that won't pay for apartments in better places, and they want to fix this up to be a decent place so these people who have low income can rent these people. And we're really talking about, when you consider low income in Flint, Michigan, we're really talking about primarily poor African American people who can't afford these things. And this group, this Carolyn Sims and Neely, you know, your candidate for mayor, has been holding it up, she says, with Neely's help, holding this up for a year. These people could have been in these apartments a year ago. And as this young lady from the major grants was telling him, you know, you're waiting 2 more weeks. This has been going on a year. I don't know if HUD is going to permit this. And HUD is going to say, you're going to have to pay, and they've said this. I don't care if you won't use the $500,000 that's sitting there to be used. You're going to pay the $500,000 to renovate it. And the money will then have to come out of the general fund. That's money that is put into that general fund coming from taxes, income taxes, property taxes. So now we'll end up, if we have to use the general fund money, we'll end up paying twice. We've already paid our federal taxes, $500,000 sitting there to be used, and the council, in their game playing apparently with the mayor, because the mayor's asked for it. Anything the mayor asked for, mostly, invariably, these 5 people end up opposing it. Well, here, when they do that, you know, they hurt innocent people again. Now, we need to do something about this apartment. And why should we pay taxes twice Once the federal tax with money sitting there and now the local tax being taken out of the general fund. I say this council should act and grant the mayor's request, because that's what HUD wants. That's what HUD said. You can take the $500,000 from the general fund, or from the federal funding that we've given you. You can take that money, but if you don't, you're going to take it out of the general fund, because you're going to renovate those apartments. And that's where we are. And some might say, well, you know, why is the federal government so hard and strong on this? Well, they've been trying for apparently 3-4 years to get this place fixed up. It started with Stanley, went to Kurtz, now it's Williamson. And Williamson says, okay, I'll fix it up. Give me the $500,000 from the general or from the federal monies, and I'll fix it up. And the HUD says, okay, we'll give it to you, get the council approval. If the council doesn't approve it, you're still going to fix it up, and it's going to be out of HUD, out of your general fund money, and we end up paying twice. It's ridiculous. It seems to me, in my mind, $500,000 of your tax money is too much to pay just to get the mayor's goat. Now, you know, we have a kind of the other side of the coin here, too. You know, Williamson and his administration should take extra steps to attempt to oblige even his most angry people, the people he dislikes the most on that. He should do what he can to come together on that. You know, and, you know, as a public official, you know, our cherished responsibility, it seems to me, is servicing our constituency. Here's a step that the mayor might take in the direction of the council in trying to accommodate the council's position on some issues. And the council, of course, helping on the other issues that I mentioned today. Play that next tape, will you, please?
It's a case that has the mayor's office and the Civil Service Commission at odds once again. ABC 12's Kathy Schafferin has more on the story.
Officials with Flint Civil Service Commission say they were stunned this week when they heard that Robert Case, the fired water pollution control supervisor they recommended be rehired, was laid off again this week.
That we have to take a stand because someone has to take a stand.
Case, who worked out of the city's water department building on Beecher Road, was fired over a year ago when the mayor accused Case of granting unauthorized overtime. Just 1 week ago today, however, a judge ruled the Case be immediately reinstated to employment with back pay.
We're not saying return him to the same job. We're saying reinstate him to employment.
But Collier Nick says when Case returned to the personnel office on Monday, instead of being given a new job and back pay, he was given a layoff notice.
It was in direct violation of the judge's order.
Rick Champanella, an attorney out of Detroit representing the city, told us by phone that there was no violation of the judge's order. He claims the city is not in contempt of anything because Case's position was eliminated shortly after the firing. Champanella claims back in November the city granted Case's grievance for the firing, but now they're unable to reinstate him to a job that doesn't exist. But the Civil Service Commission claims the mayor is still in violation of the judge's ruling.
The judge's ruled he must be reinstated to employment. He must be paid back pay.
In the meantime, she says Case's attorneys are gearing up for legal action to force the city to rehire Case.
And they do intend to file a motion for an order to show cause why the mayor should not be held in contempt of court.
In Flint, Kathy Schafferin, ABC 12 News.
The Clare County Sheriff's Office.
Well, I think the mayor could do a lot of good if he would allow this fellow to be hired back in, whether it's on his old job or his new job or whatever the case is, so that he can retire from the city. And I think it would show good faith on his part to do that. The court has ordered that, and the question of whether or not they violated the court order, whether the mayor violated the court order by eliminating his job, You know, it'll go to court. One side will say one thing, the other side will say the other thing. Why should we have to do that? Why doesn't the mayor just give the guy a job, like the court ordered, and then we'd be through with this nonsense? You know, these lawyers are being paid by the taxpayers. This is crazy. And I think if he did that, he'd show good faith to the council, because the council is supporting this guy getting his job back. And then, of course, the council, you know, provide the $500,000 for the renovation of the apartments we're talking about, and they should allow him to appoint his commissioners to the Housing Commission, even though legally he probably doesn't have to have their authority, but it would be a nice gesture to see if we can get things back on track again. Now here's another misuse of your tax money by an organization that we talked about in the past. You remember that Ron Fonger, the investigative reporter with the Flint Journal, has raised the issue about misuse of public monies by the Career Alliance nonprofit organization. The Career Alliance receives about $20 million a year, mostly from the federal tax dollars, to oversee job training, placement, education of mostly low-income and underemployed citizens. In this past Sunday's Journal, Fonger disclosed a sharply critical letter sent from the State Department of Labor and the Department of Labor and Economic Growth to the Career Alliance, listing something like 27 different areas of concern, like misuse of credit cards, misuse of programs for the unemployed or underemployed, misspending money in these areas. In fact, they have raised the issue of one of these agencies that Career Alliance has hired to help in their unemployment. They've accused the agency, or at least they've alluded to the fact that they may be falsifying employment retention record statistics. Now, if that's true, that's a crime. That's obtaining money under false pretenses if they're falsifying records, and we're paying for what records they give us, which are falsified. You know, what bothers me in this situation, because we talked about a consulting organization last week, we discussed this, which came up with a telephone system and recommended a telephone system and then made application to do the job. You know, what bothers me is how this management group and this extravagant spending of taxpayers' money, you know, for the unemployed, how it was approved while labor union members sit on the Career Alliance Board of Directors. What excuse do they have to allow this kind of a scam? You know, here we have this company is getting a $117,000 contract when they had been the consultants to establish the guidelines to award the contract to themselves, in effect. The union who put these union officials on this Career Alliance board should be asking, why did they allow this to happen when their own members are the people the Career Alliance is supposed to help? And then in this article, we had an update on the Career Alliance Executive Director, Pam Loving's salary. It's even higher than we mentioned last week, like 107. It's over $210,000. Now here's, do you have that tape of that Career Alliance? Don't worry about it. But anyway, you know, what's typically ironic is that this organization, Career Alliance, while people are unemployed, are misusing the money given to them by the taxpayers to help these people get a new start. You know, this is all, they use this stuff to get kind of self-serving. They say they've never been charged by the state. You know, what they do, it's a gimmick. If the state comes in and disallows them spending some money, because about 90% apparently the money comes from the state, from the federal government through the state, these are tax dollars. If it's disallowed, for example, on credit cards or falsifying records, they shift the cost of that over to the various foundations that give them money for that purpose, the Mott Foundation and what have you, and shift it over there, and then the state just passes on it because they're not using their money for this, or they're not misusing their money, they're misusing the foundation's money. Well, you know, this board of directors said, hey, we're going to look at this, and if we find that there's a problem here, we'll correct it. You know, if you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn that I'll sell you. Can you imagine what they'll do if they lay this woman off? She can resign herself, and we still have to pay her a year's salary. She gets the, you know, it's like, talk about a golden parachute deal. This is one. She wants to leave on her own. She leaves, and we have to pay her for another year, even though she's the one that left. I mean, this board of directors gave away the entire candy store. Well, we'll see what happens. Fogger is still on it, and I'll tell you, I think right now what he's doing, he's finding activities that could very well be criminal, and I think that's the bottom line here. The possibility of criminality involved in this whole thing, and I think that's what Career Alliance people have to be careful of, including the board. The board of directors of Career Alliance have an obligation to be looking out for this, and all you hear is, hey, well, we didn't know, we didn't, you know, we didn't realize it, we didn't know all these things were going on. Well, you know, there's such a criminal law called nonfeasance in office. It's called willful neglect of duty in Michigan. They may be chargeable under that if this is considered a public corporation. And I suggest to you that it may very well be. So these people who are on that boards of directors, you know, so they can put it in their resume, could be in serious trouble with the law also. So they better take heed. Let's go on. Last week on our show, we mentioned the bizarre event that occurred in Flushing Middle School when a science teacher bugged another teacher's classroom. Remember that? The first story was about 2 weeks ago, classroom bugged. And then the next one that came out this week. But anyway, we told you that this was a criminal law. You can't do this, a criminal law violation. But we predicted that probably Leighton would charge this person with a misdemeanor, even though she could be charged with a felony. And apparently that's exactly what he did. We predicted he would, and that's what he did. Teacher charged in bugging incident. A science teacher at Flushing Junior High will face criminal charges for allegedly bugging another teacher's classroom. The teacher, 44, was charged Thursday Thursday with one count of attempted eavesdropping, a misdemeanor that carries a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail or a $1,000 fine. Well, anyway, you know, as I say, I mentioned last week that this is probably going to happen. Can you play that tape?
Another teacher's classroom is now heading to court. 44-year-old Ann Harvey is charged with eavesdropping. This after police say she planted a wireless listening device on the back of a chair in another teacher's classroom. Police say she bugged the teacher's room after her daughter complained of problems with the teacher. She will report for arraignment on June 25th. If convicted, she could face up to 1 year in jail.
You know, like I told you last week, again, she won't spend any jail time. She'll probably be fined and put on probation. And I think that this is an excellent case for the prosecutor's diversion program, if it's still in existence, which offers an accused person the opportunity to have, in this case, her record expunged after a certain period of time. It's usually 6 months to a year. And that's if she doesn't commit any other violations of law during this probationary period. And it's unlikely, you know, these type of people do not commit other crimes. And I'm sure she's sorry that she did this. And if they put them on a diversion program, this way she would have no criminal record at the end of the 6 months or a year, and her career may be saved. It's a terrible tragedy. You know, this method of dealing with this kind of a problem, in my opinion, serves both the defendant and the community. Obviously, we have to have a deterrent impact on these kinds of crimes to discourage people from committing them. And but at the same time, I think we have to look at the total picture and see if this person is a threat to the community in the future, and if she's not, and it was a nonviolent crime, which it wasn't, then I think we want to try to do what we can to rehabilitate the person and give her an opportunity to save her career. And I think that Leighton is trying to do that, and I commend him for it. Well, we have a number of other things that we wanted to discuss, but because of time, we won't get to them, but we'll bring them back next week and we'll talk about them. It has this thing about the bill put in the legislature by Gleason would bar felons from holding offices, the mercury leak at Northern High School, the problems yet with the senior citizen centers are all coming up again. So we'll discuss those and the new subject matters that we'll run into this week. In the meantime, God willing, we'll see you next week, and between now and then we'll be at the White Horse. Come on down and see us.